Well, hey there, Mama, and welcome back to the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast, episode number 156. I'm Emily McDermott, and I'm here beside you on this journey as we work together to declutter your home, head, and heart. Have you ever attempted to follow a cleaning schedule? I have attempted. Do you ever buy a bunch of planners and then you never use them? You are not alone. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to chores or cleaning, tidying, home management, any of it. And in today's episode, I am chatting with Kelly Briggs from Simple Home Mom all about her best tips for approaching chores with self-compassion, especially if you are neurodivergent, maybe you struggle with ADHD or have neurodivergent kiddos. And before I introduce Kelly, just want to give a quick reminder about the 2-year Pod-iversary giveaway. I'm giving away 2 $50 Amazon gift cards. I've only had one person enter so far. All you need to do is leave a review in Apple Podcasts or share the show with a friend and send me that screenshot over at info@simplebyemmy.com. All the information is in the show notes for you. So now about Kelly, she has 5 kiddos ranging from ages 1 to 13, and she started her simple living journey after her 3rd child was born, when she realized that routines were needed in order to keep her sanity. She provides practical tips to help moms make their home lives easier, and she writes over on Substack and has free and paid posts for those who need more support. She has tips, printables, audios, much more. Also have her information for Instagram, which is how I originally connected with her. So what do you say? Grab the notebook and pen and let's dive into today's conversation with Kelly Briggs. Hey there, Mama. Are you tired of all the stuff crowding your home, calendar, and mind? Do you wish you could say goodbye to the endless to-do list running around in your head? Want to declutter but don't know where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to Moms Overcoming Overwhelm, where you will find proven and practical solutions to declutter your home, head, and heart. Hi, I'm Emily, a wife, boy mom, and simplicity seeker. I struggled to get pregnant and felt overwhelmed until I discovered decluttering could create the physical and emotional space I needed to become a mom. Now, 2 kids later, I've transformed my life and motherhood by developing simple systems around decluttering, capsule wardrobes, kid stuff, cleaning and tidying, meal planning, time management, and more, and I can't wait to share them with you. If you're ready to reclaim the time and energy you crave, be present with your kids, and finally enjoy the life and motherhood you so deserve, let's kick overwhelm to the curb, shall we? Grab your lukewarm coffee, your notebook and pen, and clear off some counter space. Let's do this. Well, hey, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast. I am really thrilled to talk to you today.
Well, thanks for having me and for being persistent on having me.
I know you are in the throes of a kind of new season of motherhood with a baby. And we were just kind of talking about how evening schedules are unpredictable. So we're chatting when hopefully there's a little bit of quiet in the house with kiddos that are supposed to be going to sleep. But I am just so thankful for you. You really introduced me to a wonderful community of moms that were pursuing this minimalism and simplicity route. And I've maintained a lot of friendships through the years. So I would love it if you could tell us a little about you and your family and how you serve moms.
Sure. So we have 2 dogs. You just heard one of them. I just ran outside. We'll see. They're probably going to follow me. So we have 5 kids and they range from age 13 to 1. He just turned 1. And what was the second question?
Oh, how you serve moms in sort of when you're not momming yourself, how do you serve moms?
Well, over the past, I don't even know how many years now, I talk about simplifying home life and chores. That is kind of like my focus because I kind of probably about 9 years ago, I lost my brain and like got super overwhelmed with how to do anything around the home. I think I had my 3rd kid at that point. And so I became obsessed with figuring out how to do routines and systems, and decluttering and minimalism kind of was thrown in there. And so I just started sharing it with other moms, and it was very relatable to a lot of them. And I haven't stopped really. So I still talk about it almost every day.
Yeah, and I love, and I will make sure to link to everything in the show notes, but just you're so real. Like you really are just kind of like, this is life and this is my home
Yes.
right now, and it's not always tidy.
Yep.
And just because I've been
It can't
pursuing,
be.
it can't be, it can't be. And that, people live in this home. And I just read the book, How to Keep House While Drowning. And it was
I
so
read that
good.
too.
Yeah, just about like these care tasks for ourselves and our home and chores being included in that they're morally neutral, which means that you're not a better
Yes.
person or not a good person if you are
Yes.
not doing them to the standards of other people. And it was just such a wonderful focus on that self-compassion piece. And we were
Yes.
talking before hitting
Yeah.
record just kind of about your recent diagnosis with ADHD. And I serve a
Yeah.
lot of moms with ADHD. And there's a lot of like
Yeah.
shame involved with like,
Mm-hmm.
my
Yeah.
brain doesn't work with other people. I'm not
Right.
organized. Can you talk a little bit about kind of like that experience for you and how that has impacted how you approach chores or the home
Mm-hmm.
management that you teach?
Yes. So, I mean, it's transformed over the years. And of course, the systems that I use now, and makes sense why I figured them out over the years because it helps my brain the most. I would get so frustrated with trying like new routines and all the things like planning, planners, and it would be great for a time, but then it would stop working. And I'm like, why isn't this working? Oh, I better try the next new thing, the next new schedule, the next new routine over and over and over. And of course, there's that mental part of, like you said, like beating ourselves up. Like, why can't I do this? Or why can't I keep the house tidy enough? And why is this working for this person, but it's not working for me? So it was a lot of self-discovery and just reading, about different ways of doing things and realizing for myself, I get really stressed out if I've got too much on my list and if I feel like I have to get a lot done every day.
Yeah.
So that's where my loop planning that I talk about sometimes comes in, is that I pulled in loop planning, which is essentially just like a bunch of tasks in a circle, and you start at the beginning and you keep going till you get to the end and you start over again. And for me, it isn't tied to like a certain day or a time or anything. It's just like I go through them as I can. Because some days maybe my kids need, they're sick or something and I have to attend to them and I can't get as much done. So then I just pause in that loop and then pick back up the next day. Or some days I'm completely burnt out because I had a really, weekend full of peopling, which was my past weekend. And I was like, I'm going to give myself grace Monday, knowing that I'm probably going to be burnt out Monday just from a lot of stimulation, like noise and sound and all that. And of course, I didn't know that about myself until recently. I knew that about some of my kids because quite a few of them are neurodiverse, but I didn't realize it about myself. I was just like, what's wrong with me? I need to push through and do this routine. And why does that person, they're so great at that and like so consistent, and not realizing, oh, ups and downs are normal, especially for some brains. And the loop planning kind of like took off that stress for me of having to check off every box every day. Um, that's kind of where it came from for me. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, okay, that's why I really gravitated towards loop planning there. But also at the same side of things, routines are really good for all brains. So I do have certain things that are really ingrained in me. Like I bring down the laundry every morning, or we clean the bathrooms on Friday or Saturdays, that kind of thing. So having some kinds of routines that are just, you just do them because that's really, it takes off like a mental load, but also having some flexibility in there too.
Yeah.
And
I,
variety.
I love the flexibility and just that grace because if you try to follow a really rigid chore or cleaning
Hmm.
schedule, then it's like life happens. And then we get that shame of like, oh, I'm behind, I'm behind.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
when you have that loop planning system, it's like, I'm not behind. It's just that the next
Yeah.
thing is just going to happen the next day. And that's okay because there's no like
Yes.
requirement or deadline. And one of the things that I have learned recently in reading the book that I just mentioned, and also the Order from Chaos book about adult ADHD, is just working with your brain, like
Hmm.
understanding how to develop a system that works for your brain, no matter what the norm is. Because the
Yes.
norm, a
Yes.
neurotypical system, might be very like micro organized, like might look a
Oh
certain
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the, I always thought like, oh, well, I should tell my clients that they should have clear countertops because that's, the best thing because it's clutter free. But then
Hmm.
realizing some people need to have things out and see them because if they don't see them,
Yes.
forget about
Yep.
them. And
Yeah.
there's just so much to understanding, the way that your brain works and then having it be like, okay, this works for me, and that's okay that I can't
That's right.
follow that
Yep.
neurotypical or just kind of like anything that's within the popular culture of decluttering and organizing. We
Hmm.
feel like we have to fit within that. And I love that
Exactly. Yeah.
you're promoting the freedom of
Hmm.
not having to fit into that
Yeah.
particular paradigm.
Yes, I actually have a really good story that kind of shares what you're just talking about. And, with getting my diagnosis this year, I've been an advocate for like my children for quite many, many years now of how their brains function and being like, this is why it's hard for them to tidy up. And like even explaining to my husband, because he doesn't come from an educational background or anything. So it's harder for him to understand. He also doesn't have brains quite like them. Like he has some characteristics, but not full blown ADHD or ASD or anything. And because some people like we can have it's the executive functioning skills of like planning and organizing and whatnot. We can, a lot of us, many people can have like lagging skills in those, but not have all of them to say it's ADHD. So everybody can struggle in certain different ways. Anyways, I digress. So, getting my diagnosis, my husband, he's got a servant's heart. He loves to like serve, he loves to take care of us and do errands and fix things. Like that's just who he is. But he would come out from work at 6 o'clock every evening and he would walk out to the kitchen and or the main room and it's like a bomb. It's a disaster. Because it usually is with, having a lively family. And he would feel obligated, just like mentally obligated to have to tidy it. Like he walks out, he sees the mess. He's like, oh my gosh, I have to clean this. He's not like shaming anybody or anything. It's just like this mental thing of like, I have to clean this. Because his brain, he very much is like, you do this every day. And like he can go with that, like the rhythms of that structure of like, do the kitchen, do the laundry, do this, do that, do this. And it's stressful for him when it isn't that way. But so on my side of things, I'm in charge of the house, as in I do the chores and stuff. My husband helps, of course, but he works a lot. So he's more like, does a kitty litter, fixes things or whatever. He cooks too. He's an amazing cook. I'm like a microwave, throw the things in the microwave kind of cook. Quick, efficient, ADHD friendly, not too many steps here. Okay. Now I know why. So and then I had to kind of like walk through it with my husband to be like, honey, like I want you to mentally kind of give me the house to be like, okay, it's Kelly's job. And I have to realize that Kelly does things differently. And that is not going to look how my brain wants it to look like. Because, it's like he works at his job and, part of my job is taking care of the house. And, sometimes it is very messy here, but I often work in chunks of time and I lean into my energy because like I just gave the example of like I was burnt out on the weekend and just crashed from too much stimulation and busyness and I knew I couldn't I didn't have any energy. I literally couldn't pick myself up from the couch or whatever, I was just doing low key stuff. So I can't push for a regular chore routine then. So I have to wait until I've rested. I've, calmed my body, whatever needed to be done. And then I'm like, ooh, okay, here's the energy. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And I will literally do like a whole bunch of chores, and tidying, catch up with the laundry, clean the kitchen, like do it like really quick within that chunk of energy time for me. And it's not always that way, but I like lately have been leaning more and more into that because I was really trying to push myself to be like, I have to do it this way. I have to do it this way. I've got this written down when that wasn't really honoring how my brain and my energy levels and attention and everything was working. So I explained to my husband again about that because he's just, different braids is hard to understand perspective sometimes. But he's getting there. He's getting there and understanding, okay, the house is Kelly's. It's not going to look the way that I would take care of the house because he does things differently. And I'm just like, block it and just go, go, go. And even with go, 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 like we have 5 kids. And like I said, some of them are neurodiverse. So yes, it is always going to be messy and undone in some areas or, and at some times, but I'm all about like forward movement
Yeah.
and taking care of ourselves. I was feeling really scattered from the host today, very scattered and grumpy, and I think I'm still recovering from the weekend. But I was like, no, it's not the kids. It's not them making me grumpy. I'm feeling maybe a bit more anxious today, or my brain is just feeling scattered. I'm just going to do what I regularly do for chores and not like push myself to go insane to make the house perfect because that's what I would have done in the past of like, oh, the house is really messy and I'm feeling, scattered. It must be the house. And then I do the house, but then I don't feel settled because it didn't have to do with the house. It had to do with like my mental state or my burnout or whatever is going on. Yeah, that's that's a lot right there. But
Yeah, no, that's so
yeah.
helpful. And also just having a partner that you can have a conversation with and be like, hey, I'm going to have ebbs and flows in my energy levels. There's going to be ebbs and flows in like how busy we are and things going on. And just because it might
Hmm.
not look a certain way every day, I understand what's going on. And like you said, just kind of having that
Hmm.
conversation so they can see where you're coming from. And
Hmm.
also understanding kind of the baseline, like what's the baseline of the
Yes.
care needs of my family.
Yes.
And I always talk about having like your floor and your ceiling. So like the floor is like the absolute minimum that you
Yeah,
want to do. And then like, hey, if I have more energy or if I have more time or if I get that burst where I'm like, okay, I really want to do a block of like cleaning or chores or decluttering or whatever
hmm
the case is, then you can lean into that energy. But it's not like I feel bad about the situation
yeah,
or bad about myself if I have a floor day versus a ceiling day. It's just recognizing we're not robots. And also, like you said, not
yeah,
like
yeah,
pushing yourself, just honoring where you are in the season and knowing that you're taking care of your family, even if it doesn't look like how everyone else is doing it. And just having that
exactly. Yeah.
permission. We're just here to give you all the permission slips today, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I always default to when I'm feeling scattered or tired or stressed or whatever, or I'm having one of those down days is like, are my people fed? Are the dishes on? Do we have clean dishes? Is the laundry done? That's really it, like on those days. And oftentimes, like when I do start doing those things, like doing the kitchen, motivation breeds motivation. So
Yeah.
all I might be exhausted, but I had a rest in the afternoon, exhausted from like overstimulation because that often happens here with people and dogs and stuff. And then that motivation just breeds motivation, and I end up getting a bit more done anyways. But it's so good to have that mental being like that mental check-in to be like, I don't have much capacity for stuff today, but I can always lean into those bare minimum basics that's going to make sure everybody's cared for. We have clean dishes and clothes.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
totally. And I did want to talk about the concept of the plan B chores because I
Hmm.
think that fits in well with what we're talking about. Just kind of like, okay, we're always going to have a plan A for like what we think might be able to get done in a given day. But when life happens and things change, can you explain kind of how you utilize the concept of plan B chores?
Yeah, so I have like a basic in my mind and written down because writing things down helps it stick and you remember it. I have like a basic of like what I like to get done every day for chores. Again, I don't always stick to it because I honor myself. Um, but I also have a plan B. So if I know I'm not going to be able to get to the floors, vacuum them or if I'm not going to be able to clear the table or whatever. I have my plan B, which I basically just shared, which is the dishes, laundry, and meals. Those are
Mm-hmm.
my basics. And I've heard other people's plan Bs through the years too, which they would add things like, the kitty litter or other things like that. But it's really good to have a plan B. So that way, when you do have harder days or moments, you can just kind of like pull back and be like, nope, this is my plan B. This is what I do on days like these. This is going to move us forward. And I'm going to love myself in this moment because I can't do plan A or whatever you want to call that, the regular routine kind of thing.
Yeah, I just love the concept of self-compassion and just I've never really thought before about having self-compassion when it comes to all of these care tasks. Until I
Hmm.
was reading this book recently and it I
Yeah.
think for me my mom as the main caregiver that taught me about cleaning and chores, I always thought that her standard had to be my standard. And when I
Hmm.
started keeping my own home and I couldn't keep up with that standard because of whatever season I was in, I did feel kind of like, what's wrong with me? Or like, I'm not worthy if the bathrooms aren't clean. And
Hmm.
I think that that has been a real eye opener to me and just kind of like, okay, I'm working within my capacity, I'm working within my energy, I'm working with my brain, and it can look a totally different way. Like maybe it doesn't
Hmm.
make sense for you in this season to put your clothes away in drawers and you just have
Yeah.
clean piles in the laundry room. If that is
Hmm.
what needs to happen in that season, that's okay. Like it doesn't have to
Yes.
look a certain way or folding anything or like do
Yeah, I
your
gave up folding years
yeah.
ago.
Like, do your
Yeah.
people have clean clothes? Do they have
Yep.
food to eat? You know?
Yep.
So I think that that's really helpful. And I'm just curious if there's any other chore hacks or tips that have really helped you and your family, given the, neurodivergence and just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
working with different systems, whether that just be for yourself or even with your kids, kind of getting them involved that have really helped you besides what we've talked about already?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of two that come to mind right away. One is body doubling. So you'll hear this term
Mm-hmm.
in the ADHD world or neurodiversity world, is essentially having a person next to you with you while you're doing a task, not necessarily telling you what to do or doing it with you, but just being with you. Even just having somebody with you, or even actually pets sometimes can be body doublers, just like gives instant motivation sometimes. It doesn't work for every brain, of course. So this is something that you have to test out. For me, it definitely does. If I have a friend over, I don't even think about it. I'm just like tidying up the kitchen. Or if my husband is done work at 6, I suddenly like jump up from where I am. I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm ready to do stuff now. Or like we'll, be in the kitchen doing stuff together, cooking together, or working on a project together. And I do that with my kids too. They have a hard time. Some of them have a very hard time staying focused. They have a hard time because they get overwhelmed by the steps in any numerous types of chore. And just being with them is going to help them stay more focused. And also, it encourages them and also helps me to be able to teach them skills of like, okay, here's how we find your dirty clothes if the room's a disaster. So body doubling is something that we definitely lean into a lot here. And that can be applied to not just chores. That can be applied to things like bedtime. And I know bedtime, like in our house, my younger kids, they just like don't pay attention. They run away. And my husband's like, what? Like, I'm just asking them to floss and they run away. And I'm like, yes, but like they're out of it by the end of the day and they really need you to guide you. So if you're distracted even a little bit at bedtime, like forget it. They're just in another world. You really need to body double them, kind of very focused at bedtime in our house at least.
Mm-hmm.
So body doubling is a big one, and we're working on restoring a vintage trailer right now. It's really cool. But my
Ooh.
son is like, yeah, really fun. And my oldest son is like ripping up the flooring, but it's a very boring task, and he won't go do it himself because it's that boring. He needs somebody with him. As soon as somebody's with him, he's like, okay, I'm going for it. Here we go. So there's another little example of how body doubling can be helpful. And learning that strategy, you'll probably like whoever, if you're listening right now, your listeners, you might look at that strategy and realize you've been doing it or your kids have been doing it and not realizing it's a strategy, but it is. And it's can be very effective. And it's really nice to, spending time together and working on chores and skills. So that's one strategy. The second one is I call them go back baskets. And that one
Yes.
yes, and that one's great for all kinds of brains. It's not going to be great for every brain because not every strategy is going to be great for everybody at every season of life or ever really, depending on how your brain functions. But I like to use any kind of basket when I'm feeling really stressed by the host, aka today. Actually, I need to pull out my go back baskets. That would actually help. So I'm going to do that after I hang up the phone with you before I grab the baby. So I'm looking around the house and getting really stressed. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much to put away. And honestly, my husband's always like, well, just ask the kids to pick it up. And I'm like, honey, you don't realize how many steps is involved to like get them to pick things up because
Mm.
they lag those skills to be able to deal with this. I have to be standing next to them and being like, okay, let's look at garbage. Do you see any garbage? Look over there. It's just, I'm just throwing my husband in here because I know a lot of people can relate to that. Like, he's not making fun of our brains. He just has a really hard time realizing, like, they function so different.
Mhm.
So I take everything, I throw it in a basket, and I kind of put it to the side. That's when I'm feeling stressed. I like take everything, put it in a basket, and hide it or put it to the side until I have time, capacity, brain function to be able to deal with it. I've sometimes done that when I like have, like Christmas, we have family over and I just don't have capacity to tidy everything up. I hide it and I'm like, whatever. Honestly, I did that at Christmas in December and I didn't deal with it for like a month, but then I dealt with it within an hour, like it was bad, but it helped my brain in that moment to do that. I also do it for the kids. Like the kids here's a basket for each of my kids. Here you go. Take it, put stuff away. You know where it all goes. It's all your stuff. And we do different areas too. Like here's the basket to bring to the basement. And here's the basket to bring upstairs. There's a lot of management of stuff in our house because there's a lot of us. So yeah, those are two strategies.
So great. And I mention go back baskets and mention you in the next breath every time because I'm like, I love the concept. I use it
Mhm.
constantly. It's great because you can even have, like you said, like one basket that's going upstairs and then you just pass it from
Yeah.
kid to kid and be like, okay, you take your stuff out. Okay, you take your stuff
Yeah.
out. And
Or separate baskets
yes,
per
or
kid is
separate.
good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on how many you have for sure. And
Hmm.
I think that it just like you said, it's allowing yourself the grace based upon your energy and capacity in that moment or season.
Yes.
Say to yourself, okay, it's contained. I know what it is. It's not just a bunch of like random stuff. It's like, okay, I
Hmm.
know what it is. So it gives you that grace. I love these strategies, so incredibly helpful. And again, I learn so much every time just because I don't think this way. So it's like helpful for me
Right.
for the work that I do. And then also so many moms out there just wanting to not feel shame about not being able to quote unquote keep up. And
Right.
I really appreciate your time and all of your suggestions. And I'm curious, what is the best way for my listeners to connect with you?
Well, two ways. The biggest one is I love Instagram. You'll find me on Instagram at Simple Home Mom. Yeah, I have other social media, but that's the one I gravitate towards the most. I just enjoy it there. And I write on Substack. You can find me as Simple Home Mom on Substack too. That's a newer place that I've been. I kind of transferred all of my blogs and newsletters there, and it's awesome. I love it. It's just not noisy, and oh, it's great. If you haven't tried Substack, highly recommend it.
Yeah, and I sign up for one of your I guess the free version of the newsletter, and then you have a
Mhm.
paid version, and highly recommend it. It's filled with so much goodness. So I will make sure to link to that in the show notes. So thank you so much, Kelly, for coming on the show. I really
Mhm.
appreciate your time, and it was so great talking with you.
Thanks for having me.
If you like today's podcast, here's what you can do. Just take 30 seconds to leave me a review. I know you're a busy mama. You're overwhelmed, in fact, but 30 seconds of your day makes such an impact. I'll be blessed by your words. They'll definitely make my day. And who knows, you might be entered for this month's giveaway. In Apple Podcasts, scroll down to write a review. Thanks so much for your time. I'm so grateful for you.